So let's talk about the pathophysiology and evaluation of a case of epiphora. We have no financial interest in this presentation. Now when we talk about epiphora, we are talking about, we want to know about true epiphora and pseudo epiphora. Now true epiphora is because of an abnormality of the lacrimal drainage apparatus. In other words, there is a block in the drainage of tears. So this problem could be in the region of the punctum. So you could have stenosis agenesis, canaliculus, aplasia, stenosis and canaliculitis. In the sac, one could have a dacrocystocele, a fistula, a diverticula, an internal fistula or dacrylith or an atonic sac. All this can give rise to epiphora and nasolacrimal duct problems like nasolacrimal duct obstruction in a small child. So what exactly happens? So there is a failure of canalization of the nasolacrimal duct at the valve of Hassner in these cases. So this particular problem will actually give rise to the commonest problem of nasolacrimal duct obstruction, that is the congenital NLDO. The incidence of this problem is about 30% in term babies, and the symptomatic block is seen in about 2 to 6% of the children, and the onset will occur after 3 years of age. So this is how the canalization proceeds. So from the center there is this ectoderm which grows towards the eyes, and the punctum and the nasolacrimal duct are the ones which will open the last. The nasolacrimal duct can open even 1 or 2 days after birth. Now this is a very beautiful picture which shows you the actual anatomy as it is seen. So here you can see that there is the punctum and the canaliculus which are going into the region of the lacrimal sac. And this is the lacrimal sac which is located in the lacrimal fossa, and here it is opening into the region of the nasolacrimal duct, and this is the nose. So when we talk about epiphora, we also need to talk about pseudoepiphora. Now pseudoepiphora is because of problems like dry eye, eyelid problems like dystichiasis, trichiasis, entropion, epiblepharon, lag of thalamus, problems in the conjunctiva like conjunctivitis, allergy, foreign bodies. In the cornea there could be problems like foreign bodies and of course facial nerve palsy. So pseudoepiphora is actually not because of a blockage of the drainage system, but because of other factors which are causing watering. So in any child who presents with watering, we'd like to know about the onset of the symptoms. When did it start? The symptoms like tearing, crusting, discharge and redness. Does it increase or exacerbate on exposure to cold and respiratory tract infection? We always would like to look for and also ask for a history of facial anomalies or any kind of syndromic problems. Ask for a history of trauma. Always look out for other problems like infantile glaucoma. So you look for problems and ask for blepharospasm, avoidance of light, nystagmoid eye movements. Ask for a history of nasal or sinus surgery, and also ask for craniofacial anomalies like Crouzon's or Stevens-Johnson syndrome, which can cause canalicular scarring. So once we've taken a good history, we would like to examine the child, preferably under good illumination, under good magnification, and many times if possible we would like to do it under sedation or anesthesia. So in the eyelids you would like to look for crusting and redness. Look for any lid malpositions. So are the puncta in the normal position, normal location? Are they actually open? Are they closed? Look for facial abnormalities, especially conditions like Down syndrome, because they have a higher chance of having problems of watering. Look at the medial canthal swelling. Is it above or below the medial canthal tendon? If it is below the medial canthal tendon, we are dealing with a problem which is related to the lacrimal sac. Always look at the eyelids and the ocular surface as well, because you might be missing a small foreign body in the eye. As regards the puncta, you would like to look at the presence of the punctum. Are they present or are they absent? What is the position of the punctum? Is it pointing towards the eye or is it pointing outwards? Is there a punctal ectropion? Are they adequate? Are they open adequately? And are they opposed to the eyeball? In the canaliculus, obviously we cannot visualize, therefore we'd like to do a probing to see if there is any kind of canalicular stenosis, a kink, or if there is a block in the canaliculus. And of course we'd like to look at the sac, for which we can do specific tests which I'll come to. And if there are other problems like a small fistula, you can inject a dye and try to localize the fistula. So the commonest test that we would like to do in the clinic in any child who presents with watering is to put pressure on the region of the lacrimal sac, that is in the lacrimal fossa. So just on the inner aspect of the inferior orbital rim, just below the medial canthus, we like to press on the lacrimal sac and see if there's any kind of fluid coming out of the punctum and the canaliculus. So if pressure regurgitation is positive, it is a very high chance that there is a nasolacrimal duct obstruction. And of course, we can do a diagnostic probing and syringing. So when we do a probing, not only are we diagnosing and trying to find out if there is a canalicular block or if there is a common canalicular block or if there is a NLD block, we are also many times curing the patient. So if there is a CNLDO or a nasolacrimal duct obstruction, we might actually open up the obstruction and clear the block. Also, we can combine it with the syringing, and this will not only give us a diagnosis, but it will also kind of cure the patient in many of the cases. Intranasal examination can also be done if we have access to it, and many times we can discover nasal pathologies which we thought did not exist. And of course, the last is imaging in special situations. One important test that we'd like to highlight in the clinic is to do the fluorescein dye disappearance test. So it's a very useful test in cases of epiphora. So you instill 2% fluorescein into the fornices, or you just take a fluorescein strip and put it on the eye and make sure that it is sufficiently wet with the dye. So this fluorescein should ideally disappear in about 3 minutes. If it does not, then there is a high likelihood that there is a chance of a block in the nasolacrimal duct, or there is a problem with the lacrimal pump mechanism. A false negative can occur if there is a very large sac, if there is a mucocele or a distal obstruction. Again, special investigations like contrast dicrocystography can also be done, in which dye is injected and one takes an X-ray and tries to localize the position or the movement of the dye. So here you can see the dye is moving through the canaliculus into the region of the sac and finally into the nose, while on the left side it is actually getting stuck in the region of the common canaliculus. So this kind of investigation will give us a good view of what is happening, and we can find out the presence of diverticula, fistulae, stones and tumors. If you have access to more better investigation modalities like lacrimal scintillography, where we put a technetium-99 drop into the fornix, and with gamma camera imaging we are trying to see how much of activity of the dye is visible. So here if you can see in number 2, which is the left eye, the activity of the dye is progressively decreasing over time, while in number 1, which is the right eye, you can see that the activity of the dye is constant for a long time, which means that the dye is not actually moving out of the fornix. So this number 1 or the right eye actually has got a block. So this is useful in assessing blocks of the upper lacrimal system, that is the region of the canaliculus. We also have newer investigative modalities like a CT-DCG, which is better than just a dicrocystogram. Here you instill the dye and you can actually get a 3-dimensional view of the movement of the dye in the region of the canaliculus. We also have got MR dicrocystography, in which again a dye is injected into the canaliculi, and it is as useful as a CT-DCG. The role of endoscopy cannot be understated, because it is a very useful tool, not only to analyze and understand what is happening. We can use it during probing, or when we want to do an intubation. We can also use it along with a DCR, or we can do a primary endonasal DCR in these cases. Or if you have got a patient with a dicrocystocele, you can actually destroy the cyst and open up the cyst in these cases. So in summary, by having a logical approach and performing all the clinical tests and investigations, we can come to a very useful diagnosis. And the 2 tests that we would like to highlight in the clinic is, number 1, the pressure regurgitation test done properly, and secondly is